My father-in-law held a party to announce to the world that I was worthless. He didn't know I was listening, and he certainly didn't know I was taking notes. His name is Alistair Vance. If you live in this country, you know the name. It's carved in granite on museum wings, etched into the brass plaques of university libraries, whispered in boardrooms where fortunes are decided. To the world, he is a monument, a titan of industry, a philanthropic patriarch. He moves with the quiet, gravitational pull of old money. A man who built a real estate empire and then cloaked it in the armor of dignity and public service. He has the kind of face that looks like it was born to be on currency. Stern, noble, unshakable. That was the man I thought Liam's father was. The man I was terrified to meet. The man I was desperate to impress. I wasn't from that world. My world was quieter, smaller. My world was the hum of a server rack at 2 a.m. It was the elegant, undeniable truth of a perfect line of code. I was a software engineer. I didn't build skyscrapers. I built systems. I saw the world as a series of logical problems waiting for elegant solutions. There was an order to it, a meritocracy that felt clean and honest. Your code either worked or it didn't. There was no pedigree, no bloodline, just logic. And I was good at it. My life then, it had a rhythm, a comforting beat. The staccato of my keyboard, the heavy thud of Liam's hiking boots on a muddy trail, the soft scratch of a pen on a napkin as we sketched out our future in a cheap coffee shop. Liam. He was the bridge between my world and the one I was about to enter. He had the Vance name, but not the disease that came with it. He saw the world like I did, as something to be built, not just inherited. Our dream had a name, Nexus, an AI-driven logistics platform. It was our quiet rebellion, our plan to build an empire of our own, one line of code at a time. It was everything. I knew about the chasm between us, of course. The Vances weren't just rich. They were a dynasty. They moved through the world cushioned by a century of accumulated power. My father was a high school history teacher. My mother, a librarian. I went to a state school. My inheritance was a collection of well-loved books and a staggering amount of student loan debt. When Liam first took me to the Vance estate, I felt like an invasive species. The air in that house was different, thin and heavy at the same time, smelling of lemon polish, old leather, and a kind of suffocating silence. Alistair's study. I remember standing in the doorway, afraid to step on the Persian rug. He was sitting behind a desk the size of my first car, not looking at me, just observing me, like a biologist studying a microbe. He asked me what my parents did, where I went to school. The questions were simple, but they were scalpels, each one designed to peel back a layer and expose the truth he already knew, that I wasn't one of them. I didn't have the right answers, not the ones that mattered anyway. Liam squeezed my hand under the table at dinner, whispering, "He just needs to get to know you." But Alistair Vance wasn't interested in knowing me. He was interested in my data points, my origins, my lack of a suitable pedigree. I was a bug in his immaculate code, a variable he couldn't control. Still, I believed our love was the stronger algorithm, that our shared ambition, our little coffee-stained napkin dream, was enough to build a firewall against his world. I was cautiously optimistic. I was a fool. The threat started subtly. A week before the engagement party, he summoned me to his office downtown, a cavern of glass and steel overlooking the city he owned. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He told me I was a lovely girl. Smart. Ambitious. But I wasn't right for Liam. Not right for the family. He said it with the calm, detached air of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. He spoke of legacy, of bloodlines, of the great, grinding responsibility of the Vance name. A name, he explained, that was a fragile ecosystem, a name I would irrevocably damage. Then he opened a checkbook. He told me to write down a number, any number, enough to start my own company, to move to another city, to disappear. He called it a parting gift, a severance package for a relationship. I remember the feeling of the blood draining from my face, the sheer cold transactional nature of it. He wasn't trying to protect his son. He was trying to acquire a controlling interest in his future. I refused. I told him I loved Liam and that wasn't for sale. He just stared at me, his eyes flat and gray like a winter sky. And he said very quietly, "Every asset has a price, my dear, or it gets liquidated." I didn't understand then, but I was about to. The engagement party was his liquidation hearing. It was held at the estate. 100 of the city's most powerful people were there. Bankers, judges, senators, the pillars of Alistair's world. Liam and I stood in the middle of it all, smiling until our faces ached. He was so proud. He thought his father was finally accepting me. He saw the party as an embrace. It was an execution. He started the toast by talking about his son, about his love for him, about his hopes and dreams for him. It was beautiful, poetic. The room was captivated. I felt a tear prick my eye. Then the tone shifted. It was almost imperceptible at first, a slight cooling of his voice. He said that a father's greatest duty is to protect his legacy, to ensure the family name remains strong, undiluted. And then he looked at Liam. Not at me. He never looked at me. He looked at his son, and he said, "So it is with the heaviest of hearts, that I must treat my son's recent decision not as a marriage, but as a severance." The silence in the room became a physical thing. It was a weight. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Liam's hand went slack in mine. He continued. His voice was steady, infused with a chilling, artificial sorrow. "Liam, my son, has chosen to bind himself to a woman of no standing, with no family, whose ambitions are as transparent as they are artful. By this act, he has severed himself from this family, from its name, from its history, and from its future." He raised his glass. "So we are not here to celebrate a union. We are here to mourn a loss. The loss of a son." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like poison. "As of this moment, the name Vance is no longer his to use. His inheritance, his trust, his access to any family resources are terminated. He is, for all intents and purposes, a stranger to us." And then he turned his eyes, for just a moment, towards me. The mask of sorrow was gone. All I saw was cold reptilian triumph. He finished his toast. "And to the artful parasite who engineered this tragedy, I offer only this, a warning. The Vance name is not a ladder for you to climb. It is a wall you will never scale." He drank. The room was a tomb. No one moved. No one breathed. He had taken out a social guillotine and executed his own son, right there, on the ballroom floor, under the glittering chandeliers. And he had branded me the cause, the schemer, the parasite. Getting out of that room was the longest journey of my life. Every averted gaze was a stone thrown. Every whispered comment was a blow. We walked out of that house and left our entire future behind. The consequences were immediate, and they were absolute. The next morning, the funding Liam had secured for a preliminary venture, the offer was rescinded. The call came from a man who had clapped him on the back just the night before. His credit cards were declined. The lease on our apartment, which was in the Vance corporate name, was terminated. We had 30 days to vacate. Our friends, they disappeared. Calls went to voicemail. Texts went unanswered. We became ghosts overnight. It was a bloodless, silent, perfect crime. Alistair hadn't broken any laws. He had just used the system he owned, the invisible architecture of power, influence, and social capital, to erase us. Vicious rumors started to circulate, painting me as a manipulative gold digger who had tried to trap Liam. A story everyone was eager to believe because it came from the mouth of a monument. We ended up in a tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city, the kind with thin walls and the constant smell of damp. That's where the real devastation set in. The loss of a future is a quiet, suffocating thing. It's the silence where laughter used to be. It's watching the person you love, the strongest person you know, crumble. I would lie awake at night and listen to Liam's silent grief beside me. I could feel him shaking in the dark, trying not to make a sound, destroyed by the man who was supposed to build him up. The taste of cheap, bitter coffee at 3 a.m, staring at a blank screen, trying to figure out a way back. That became my life. The shame was a physical weight. It felt like I was breathing mud. There was no court for this. There was no one to appeal to. You can't sue a man for destroying your life with a toast. You can't file a police report for having your dignity stolen. The systems of power, social, financial, professional, they all answered to Alistair Vance. The failure of justice was total. It was a vacuum, a dark, empty space where fairness should have been. And I learned something in that darkness. A vacuum doesn't stay empty. It demands to be filled. Revenge. The word felt wrong at first. Too dramatic. Too vulgar. But as the days bled into weeks, it became the only word that made sense. It was the only available path. It wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming the narrative. It was about proving that our worth wasn't a commodity that Alistair Vance could assign or revoke. It was about building something so powerful, so undeniable, that it would cast a shadow over his entire empire. He thought he was an architect of dynasties, a builder of monuments, but so was I. He just didn't know it yet. My tools weren't granite and steel. They were logic and data. He had executed us in public, confident that we would just bleed out and be forgotten. He didn't know that my grief was forging itself into a weapon. He didn't know that while I was listening to his eulogy for his son, I wasn't just a victim. I was a student. He called me a parasite. He was about to find out what happens when a parasite learns how to build a better world than its host. My life was stolen from me at a party. The man who was supposed to become my father, Alistair Vance, stood before 100 of his powerful friends and called me a parasite. He disowned his own son, Liam, for loving me. He didn't use a weapon. He used his influence. We lost everything overnight, our future, our friends, our home. He turned us into ghosts, leaving us in the rubble, expecting us to be forgotten. But in that silence, I made a choice. The world he controls has no justice for people like us, so I decided to build a new one. I wasn't a parasite. I was an architect, and I was about to draw the blueprints for his destruction. The first step in building a new world is to completely vanish from the old one. We took what little we had left, a few $1,000s from my own savings, the last bits of cash Liam had on him, and we became ghosts. We packed 2 suitcases, sold my old car, and bought 2 one-way bus tickets to Austin, Texas. We chose it for its anonymity and its ambition. It was a city of glass and steel towers, a place that didn't care about your last name, only about the speed of your processor. It was the antithesis of the ivy-covered old money prison we had escaped. It was the future. We found an apartment in a part of the city that was all concrete and unforgiving sun. It was a shoebox on the 4th floor of a walk-up, with windows that looked out onto a brick wall. It was perfect. We paid the first few months in cash. We bought burner phones. We didn't use our last names. We were just Alara and Liam. No past, no connections, no trace. For the first few weeks, we barely spoke. We were just 2 refugees, learning the contours of our new, smaller lives. The grief was still a raw, open wound. I'd see Liam staring out the window at nothing, and I could feel the phantom limb of his old life aching. His family, his name, his entire history, amputated. But humiliation is a powerful anesthetic. And rage is a hell of a stimulant. My grief hardened. It fossilized into a cold, diamond-sharp point of focus. I had one purpose, one function, Nexus. Those first 2 years are a blur of caffeine and code. I worked with a monk-like obsessive focus. 18, sometimes 20 hours a day. I didn't see the sun. I didn't talk to anyone but Liam. The world outside our apartment ceased to exist. There was only the system I was building. Nexus wasn't just a business plan anymore. It was my entire universe. It was an AI that could untangle the snarled, archaic knot of global logistics. It could predict supply chain disruptions, optimize shipping routes with terrifying efficiency, and automate warehouses. It was elegant. It was brutal. And it was going to be the weapon that brought Alistair Vance's world to its knees. I poured all of his cruelty, all of his cold, transactional logic into my work. When I was designing an algorithm to ruthlessly cut inefficiencies, I pictured his face. When I wrote code to sever a redundant process, I heard his voice. Every asset has a price, or it gets liquidated. I was liquidating the old world. I was building its replacement, Liam. He was my anchor, my only connection to the person I used to be. He was recovering, but it was slow. His father's betrayal had been a soul-deep wound. For months, he was a ghost in our ghost apartment, but slowly, he started to come back. He took on the outside world so I could live inside the machine. He took a job waiting tables to keep us fed, coming home late, his feet swollen, smelling of grease and other people's dinners. He never complained. He would just put a plate of food on my desk and rub the back of my neck until the knots in my shoulders eased. Then, he started to build. He used his charm, the part of him that wasn't a Vance, the part that was all his. He started networking, not in boardrooms, but in dive bars and tech meetups. He became Liam Smith. He built a reputation from scratch. He was the business guy, the front man, the one who could translate my furious lines of code into a language that investors could understand. He was selling a dream built on the fumes of our rage. We failed. Over and over, we burned through our savings. We lived on ramen and desperation. We pitched Nexus to a dozen small-time angel investors. They'd look at us, two kids with no track record, operating out of a shoebox, and they'd pass. The door would close, and the walk back to the apartment would feel like 100 miles. Each rejection was a fresh stab, a reminder of our worthlessness in a world that only valued proven success. I remember one night, after a particularly brutal rejection, we were down to our last $200. Liam sat on the floor, his head in his hands, and whispered, "Maybe he was right, Alara. Maybe we are nothing without him." I knelt in front of him. I saw the ghost of his father in his eyes, the doubt, the ingrained belief that his worth was conditional. I grabbed his face and I made him look at me. "No," I said, my voice shaking with an intensity that scared even me. He was wrong. His world is built on sand, on names and handshakes and silent agreements. Our world is being built on logic, on math. It is undeniable. It is inevitable. We just need to survive long enough for them to see it. That was the turning point. After that, a new kind of hunger set in. We weren't just trying to succeed anymore. We were fighting to exist. We took on freelance coding jobs, working ourselves to the bone for a few $100s here and there to keep the lights on. We lived in a state of perpetual exhaustion. There was no joy. There was no life. There was only the work, the forge. We were burning away everything we were to become the thing we needed to be. Then, after 2.5 years of failures, we got a meeting. A real one, with a venture capital firm called Blackwood. They were known for being ruthless, for backing dark horses, for betting on disruption. Liam got us in the room. I did the rest. I didn't pitch them a company. I pitched them a weapon. I showed them the schematics of a broken world. The world of logistics and supply chains that Alistair Vance's tenants relied on. The world of legacy manufacturing, of inefficient shipping, of bloated inventories, a world held together by old alliances and outdated technology. Then, I showed them Nexus. I showed them how my algorithms could predict, reroute, and optimize with a speed and precision that was almost supernatural. I showed them how Nexus wouldn't just compete in that world. It would devour it. They didn't smile. They didn't nod. They just listened. When I was done, the man at the head of the table, a shark named Marcus Thorne, just stared at me for a full minute. Then he said, "You're not building a company. You're building a god, and it's a vengeful one." He smiled. "We're in. 5 million. Seed round. That $5 million was like oxygen to a drowning man. We hired a small team of the best, hungriest engineers I could find. We moved into a real office, a small, glass-walled space that felt like a palace. And we unleashed Nexus. The growth was explosive. It was a contagion. We started with small regional companies. Nexus would integrate into their systems, and, within months, their efficiency would skyrocket. Their profits would soar. Word spread. The platform was revolutionary. It didn't just save companies money. It rewired their DNA. It was smarter, faster, and more ruthless than any human CEO. Within a year, we were landing national clients. Within 2, international. And that's when I began my real work. I started targeting them, the lifeblood of Alistair Vance's empire. His most important tenants were legacy manufacturing and retail giants, companies that occupied millions of square feet of his prime real estate, companies whose stability was the bedrock of his fortune. One by one, I went after their supply chains. A national hardware conglomerate, one of Alistair's oldest partners. I signed their biggest competitor and used Nexus to help them undercut their prices by 20%. A textile giant. I gave their rival the power to manage their inventory so efficiently that they could operate with half the warehouse space. Every company that signed with Nexus became a soldier in my silent army. I wasn't attacking Alistair's buildings. I was making them obsolete. I was turning his greatest assets into liabilities, one algorithm at a time. Money was pouring in. We went through 2 more rounds of funding. Nexus was valued at $900 million, then $1 billion, then 5. My name started appearing in tech journals. I was the ghost in the machine, the mysterious architect behind the industry's biggest disruptor. I never did interviews. I never allowed my photo to be taken. Alara Vance remained a ghost. All they knew was the power of my creation. I had a new office now, on the top floor of our own building. I could see the whole city from my window. We were a world away from that shoebox apartment. But in a way, I was still there. Still fueled by stale coffee and rage. The work had consumed me. It was all I was, and Liam, he saw it. He had become a brilliant executive. Confident, respected, the public face of Nexus. He was happy for our success. But he started to look at me with a sadness in his eyes that I recognized. It was the same look he had in the weeks after the party. The breaking point came when we were planning a hostile takeover of a smaller rival logistics firm. They were good people, but their tech was a decade old. They were in our way. My plan was surgical and brutal. We would use a shell corporation to buy up their debt, then leverage it to gut their board and absorb their assets, all before they even knew who was attacking them. It was a standard corporate raider playbook. It was something Alistair Vance would have admired. Liam read the proposal, and his face went pale. He came into my office and closed the door. "This is what we're doing now?" he asked, his voice quiet. "This is who we are?" I didn't look up from my monitors. "This is how we win, Liam. You can't build an empire with half measures." "An empire?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what this is? I thought we were building a future. Our future." "This is our future," I said, finally turning to him. My voice was cold. I knew it was. I couldn't seem to find any other tone. "A future where no one can ever do to us what your father did. A future where we are the ones holding the knife." He stared at me, and his expression was something I had never seen before. It was a look of horrified recognition. "My God," he whispered. "He did it. He finally did it." "What are you talking about?" "My father," he said, his voice breaking. "He wanted to kill the part of me that wasn't a Vance. The part that loved you. He failed. But he succeeded with you, didn't he? He wanted to kill the person you were, the woman I fell in love with. And he won. Because she's gone. You're just like him now. Cold, ruthless. All of this." He gestured around the vast, empty office. "This isn't a victory, Alara. It's his final trophy." His words hit me harder than any of Alistair's, because they were true. I had spent 5 years turning myself into a weapon, and in the process, I had become as cold and as sharp as one. I had built a fortress of success around myself, but I was alone inside. Liam walked out of my office, and the silence he left behind was louder than Alistair's speech, louder than the cheers of our investors, louder than anything I had ever heard. I looked out the window at the city I had conquered. I had the power. I had the money. I had the means to finally, completely destroy Alistair Vance. But I was losing the one thing I had started this war to protect. I had won every battle, but I was standing on the brink of losing everything that mattered. I had nearly defeated my enemy, but I was terrifyingly close to becoming him. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't know what the next line of code was supposed to be. For 5 years, Liam and I lived like ghosts. We vanished and poured all our rage and grief into building a new world from scratch. That creation was Nexus. I designed it to be a weapon, a billion-dollar behemoth built to systematically dismantle Alistair Vance's empire. I became an architect of disruption, a ghost in the machine, and I was winning. But the forge that created the weapon also burned away the person I was. Liam, the man I did all this for, looked at me and saw his father's reflection. He said I had become the thing we were fighting. He was right. I stood on the precipice of total victory, but I was completely alone. The final move was on the board, but I had to decide what kind of queen I was going to be. For 2 days after Liam walked out of my office, I didn't work. I didn't look at a single screen. I just sat in that silent room, 40 stories above the city, and let his words echo. You're just like him now. It was the most profound system failure I had ever experienced. The core logic of my entire existence had been corrupted. I had set out to prove Alistair Vance's worldview wrong. That worth is built, not inherited. But I had adopted his methods. His coldness, his belief that people were assets to be managed or liquidated. My revenge had become a mirror, and I hated the reflection. I was building an empire, but the foundation was cracking. Because the foundation was never Nexus, or the money, or the power. It was Liam. It was always Liam. Without him, the entire structure was meaningless, a monument to nothing, so I did the one thing I hadn't done in 5 years. I surrendered. I left the office, went back to our empty, sterile apartment, and I waited for him. When he came home, I didn't give him a business plan or a strategic analysis. I just told him he was right. I told him I was lost. I told him that the architect had forgotten her own blueprints. That the woman he fell in love with was buried under years of rage and code, and I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to dig her out. We talked all night. For the first time, we talked about the cost. The profound, isolating cost of my obsession. We didn't just rebuild our relationship. We redesigned it. The final act of this war wouldn't be about revenge. Not anymore. Revenge is a fire that consumes everything, including the person who lights it. This would be about justice, a rebalancing of the scales. It wasn't about destroying Alistair Vance. It was about making him, and his entire world of inherited privilege, irrelevant. We were going to finish what we started. Together. On our terms. The final push began the next morning. My focus was back, but it was different. It wasn't the frantic, obsessive energy of before. It was a calm, absolute certainty. A quiet hum. The target was a company called Sterling Vanguard Industries. It was a dinosaur, a sprawling legacy manufacturing giant. It was also the crown jewel in Alistair's tenant portfolio, and a cornerstone of his personal history. He sat on its board. Its stock was the bedrock of his oldest friends' portfolios. Sterling Vanguard was a symbol of the old world, of the way things had always been done. And we were going to acquire it. Not absorb it, not gut it, acquire it. It was a hostile takeover, but not a brutal one. It was an act of irresistible logic. For 6 months, we had been quietly positioning Nexus as the indispensable logistics partner for Sterling Vanguard's biggest customers. We made them so efficient, so profitable, that Sterling Vanguard's own archaic systems became a liability. We didn't attack them. We simply made their environment hostile to their survival. We created the disease, and we were selling the cure. The final move was a tender offer to the shareholders. We offered them a glimpse of the future, a merger with Nexus that wouldn't just save their company but would make it 10 times more powerful. We weren't raiders at the gate. We were evangelists for a new religion. The old guard on the board, Alistair's cronies, they fought it. They called us vultures, disruptors. They didn't understand. We weren't there to tear down their temple. We were there to convert it. While the financial battle raged, I made a call. To Forbes. They had been trying to get an interview with the ghost of Nexus for years. I agreed, on 2 conditions. I wouldn't be interviewed in person, and my photo would be tasteful and anonymous. But I would give them the exclusive story of Nexus, and I would give them their cover. The day the deal closed, the magazine hit the stands. Liam brought a copy into the war room. The headline was perfect, better than I could have written. It didn't mention revenge. It didn't mention the Vances. It simply said, "The outsider who remapped the world," and below it, a single line I had given them in my written statement. "The future is a meritocracy." Checkmate. But the game wasn't over until the king knew he had lost. I had 1 copy of the magazine delivered by a private messenger to Alistair Vance's office. I timed it perfectly. The messenger was instructed to place the package on his desk at exactly 9:31 a.m. At 9:30 a.m., the news of the Sterling Vanguard acquisition broke on every major financial network. The final killing blow. I didn't need to see it to know it happened. I had run the simulation in my head 1,000 times. The dawning horror. The realization that the artful parasite he had tried to crush had just become the architect of his irrelevance. He hadn't been defeated by a rival. He had been rendered obsolete by the future. His empire wasn't destroyed, but it was devalued. His name, once a synonym for power, was now a footnote in a story about me. The aftermath was quiet. There was no victory party, no champagne. Liam and I just stood in the war room, the screens now displaying our victory, and we watched the sun rise over the city. We had done it. We had survived, so was it worth it? The question hangs in the air, doesn't it? The answer isn't simple. Revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't bring back the people you used to be. The ghosts of those 2 kids on the bus, fleeing in the night, will always be a part of me. The rage, the obsession. It cost me 5 years of my life. It almost cost me the man I love. It carved parts of my soul away and replaced them with something colder, harder. But here is what it did do. It gave me back my own story. Alistair Vance tried to write an ending for me, to define me by a single word: worthless. He failed. We proved that a person's worth is not a thing that can be given or taken away by a cruel old man. It is a thing you build, line by line, day by day. We filled the vacuum that the failure of justice left behind. It wasn't happiness that filled it. It wasn't peace. It was balance. The quiet, grim satisfaction of a finely balanced equation. I look at this empire I've built, this world I remapped, and I know now that it's not a monument to my revenge. It's a testament to my survival. Alistair is still alive. He is an old, diminished man, living in a world that has moved on without him, his name a relic of a bygone era. He is irrelevant, and that is a fate far worse than ruin. It is oblivion. He held a party to announce to the world that I was worthless. So I built a world that proved him irrelevant, and then I got back to work.